sir.
Sit down, Jones. Sit
Oh,
down.
thanks very much.
I tell you, Wilson, they're a nation of automatons, led by a lunatic who looks like Charlie Chaplin.
The gentlest comedy Britain ever made was acted by men who had survived the real thing: bayonet wounds, prisoner of war camps, the slaughter of the Somme, and the BBC very nearly buried the whole series before a single episode reached the air. Behind the bumbling home guard of Walmington-on-Sea lies a story of genuine courage, real loss, and a secret the writers kept hidden in plain sight for 9 years. Fact 1. The BBC almost buried it before it began.
I want to hear you scream. Come on. Scream. Come on.
When Dad's army did not arrive fully formed, it began life under a completely different title, The Fighting Tigers, and, strikingly, neither of the two men who wrote it chose the name it would become famous under. The title Dad's Army was imposed from above by the BBC's then head of comedy, Michael Mills. Even getting that far was a battle. The senior executive responsible for the channel was deeply uneasy about the entire idea, reportedly feeling that you simply could not poke fun at Britain's finest hour that desperate summer when invasion seemed only days away. A comedy about the aging men left behind to defend the country with broom handles and pitchforks struck some inside the corporation as close to disrespectful. Then came the most damning moment of all. When an early episode was shown to a sample audience to gauge the public reaction before broadcast, the verdict was brutal. The majority thought it was very poor, and a written report was produced full of negative comments. It could easily have sunk the series before it ever reached a single living room. What happened next has become legend. Rather than let that report derail everything, the production team quietly slid it to the bottom of producer David Croft's in-tray, where it could do no further harm. The show went out as planned. Within a few years, it was drawing audiences of around 18 million people. A sitcom its own test viewers had dismissed as a failure became one of the most cherished programs in the history of British television.
Yeah, this isn't ours. This is a lot of Zulus dancing up and down.
That belongs to the vicar.
Fact 2. The gentle pacifist had survived 2 world wars.
I don't care to look at a nun's legs. It would be very impolite.
Arnold Ridley played Private Godfrey, the soft-spoken, slightly dithering old medic who is famously revealed in one episode to have been a conscientious objector. Almost no one watching had any idea that the man playing him had lived through some of the most savage fighting of the 20th century. Ridley served with the Somerset Light Infantry in the First World War and fought at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. He was wounded 3 separate times. Shrapnel tore into his back and legs. He was shot through the thigh. In hand-to-hand trench fighting a German bayonet all but severed his left hand and arm. He was bayoneted in the groin, and a blow from a rifle butt left him prone to blackouts for the rest of his life. He was invalided out in 1917, his left hand effectively useless. That ruined hand was more than just biography. It became the practical reason his character carried the first aid bag rather than a rifle. The actor genuinely could not manage a heavy weapon. Extraordinarily, Ridley went back. He re-enlisted in the Second World War when he was already in his 40s, was sent to France, and was evacuated from Dunkirk in 1940, suffering acute shell shock. In 1944, a flying bomb struck his home. He could speak, just about, of the First War. The second he refused to discuss at all, because to recount it, he said, he would have to relive it. The doddery old gentleman of Walmington-on-Sea was, in truth, one of the bravest men ever to appear in a British comedy. And as a footnote that delights modern audiences, Arnold Ridley was the great-uncle of Daisy Ridley, who would one day carry a lightsaber in Star Wars.
We can't have anybody waiting on us in this platoon, Wilson. No, right. This is a democratic unit. We eat together, sleep together, and fight together.
Fact 3. Half the platoon had really been to war.
The type of bomb we're going to use will be represented by this can. Have you got it? You got the bomb? Yes. Well, show it to them.
Ridley was far from alone. The cast assembled to play a comic, last-ditch defence force was, to a remarkable degree, made up of men who had seen genuine military service. Clive Dunn, who played the excitable old veteran Lance Corporal Jones, forever shouting "Don't panic," was in real life a former prisoner of war. He had served with the 4th Queen's Own Hussars, was captured and spent years in captivity at the hands of the enemy. The man who played an old soldier endlessly reliving his long-ago campaigns had a very real war of his own behind him. John Laurie, the doom-laden Scottish undertaker Private Fraser, had also fought at the Somme in the First World War, the very battle that nearly killed Ridley, though Laurie came through it physically unscathed. And Arthur Lowe, the pompous Captain Mainwearing, had served as a sergeant major in the Second World War. There is a quiet poignancy in all this that the comedy itself never spelled out. The writers, Jimmy Perry and David Croft, both had wartime experience of their own, and they understood that beneath the buffoonery, these were men who would, if it truly came to it, have been prepared to die for their country. The laughter worked precisely because the actors knew exactly what they were so gently sending up. They had been there themselves.
You're muddling. Take a leave of his senses.
Fact 4. The captain refused to take the script home.
Mr. Mainwaring, aren't there any nice-looking Germans?
No.
Arthur Lowe's Captain Mainwaring is one of the great comic creations of British television. The self-important bank manager, forever convinced of his own authority. What is far less well known is how close the part came to being played by someone else entirely. Both Thorley Walters and Leonard Rossiter turned the role of Mainwaring down.
Miss Jones has just had an intruder.
What?
Yeah, she's very upset about it.
Why, did he get away?
And John Pertwee, soon to become the 3rd Doctor Who, was also considered before Lowe was finally cast. Once he had the part, Lowe approached it in his own inimitable way. He flatly refused to take scripts home in order to learn his lines. When it was suggested that he really ought to, he is reported to have replied that he would not have such damn rubbish in his house.
Your name will also go on the list. What is it?
Don't tell him, Pike.
Pike.
He learned his dialogue at the studio instead, and frequently fluffed it, and yet, somehow, it never seemed to matter, because his delivery was so perfectly Mainwaring that audiences forgave him everything. There was a deeper irony buried in the casting.
Now, I'm going to have a word with these prisoners.
You can't speak any German, can you, sir?
They'll know by the tone of my voice that I'm in charge.
The blustering captain who, in the show's own storyline, had never actually seen frontline combat in the First World War, was played by a man who had genuinely risen to the rank of sergeant major in the real army. And life blurred into fiction in another way too. Colleagues observed that Lowe, much like Mainwaring, was rather dominated at home by a formidable wife. The line between the actor and the character he played was, by all accounts, remarkably thin.
Leave it to me, Jones.
Good heavens.
What do you mean, good heavens? Good heavens.
Fact 5. The wartime theme song was written in the 1960s.
Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler?
Few pieces of music feel more authentically of the Second World War than the show's signature tune, Who Do You Think You Are Kidding, Mr. Hitler? It sounds, for all the world, like a genuine music hall morale booster from 1940. It is nothing of the kind. The song was written specially for the series in 1967 and 1968, more than 20 years after the war. It so vividly evokes. Jimmy Perry wrote the lyric himself and composed the music with Derek Taverner, deliberately crafting a pastiche so convincing that audiences simply assumed it was the real article. To complete the illusion, Perry wanted a genuine voice from the era. He approached one of his own boyhood idols, the much-loved wartime entertainer Bud Flanagan, and persuaded him to record it for a fee of 100 guineas. Flanagan's warm, slightly cracked delivery is a large part of why the song lands the way it does. It carries the actual texture of the period in every line. There is a melancholy postscript. Bud Flanagan died only a few months after the recording, in 1968, which makes the Dad's Army theme one of the very last things this great variety star ever committed to tape. Every time the opening titles roll and that voice rings out, audiences are hearing one of the final performances of a now vanished age of British entertainment. If you're enjoying this, it would mean a lot if you subscribed. It helps us keep making videos like this one. Just hit that button and you'll never miss a new one.
I mentioned there was a sort of burnt taste about the porridge. So she picked up the pan and poured it in his own baguette.
Fact 6. Private Pike was the writer himself. The youngest member of the platoon, Frank Pike, the scarf-wearing, mollycoddled, stupid boy, was not conjured out of nothing. Jimmy Perry based him directly on his own younger self. As a teenager during the war, Perry had been an eager and slightly naive member of the Home Guard, exactly the sort of well-meaning boy who would have worn a woolen scarf because his mother insisted upon it. When the time came to write the series, much of Pike's wide-eyed enthusiasm and gullibility came straight from his own memory. Even the show's most famous insult has a personal root. "You stupid boy." Mainwaring's withering put-down to Pike was a phrase that Perry's own father used to aim at him as a child. A private family rebuke became one of the most quoted catchphrases in the whole of British comedy. And there is one more twist. When Perry first dreamed up the series, he did not picture himself as Pike at all. As a working actor whose career had stalled, he originally intended to write himself a far more glamorous part, the role of the smooth-talking black market spiv, Private Walker. In the end, he stayed firmly behind the typewriter, and the show was the better for it. But Dad's Army very nearly had its own creator standing in the ranks. Fact 7. The secret the writers hid for 9 years. One of the most carefully sustained jokes in all of Dad's Army was never once stated out loud. Throughout the series, the diffident Sergeant Wilson is quietly implied to be in a relationship with the widowed Mrs. Pike. Frank's mother and young Pike, entirely innocently, calls him Uncle Arthur. The hints are everywhere for those who care to look. Pike and Wilson share the same languid mannerisms. Mrs. Pike grows visibly anxious whenever her son blurts out something indiscreet about Uncle Arthur staying late at the house. The strong implication, threaded with great care through episode after episode, is that Wilson is in fact Pike's biological father, and yet the writers never once confirmed it on screen. That confirmation came only at the very end. On the last day of filming, the actor Ian Lavender, who had played Pike for the show's entire run, finally asked David Croft outright whether Wilson really was his father. Croft's reply, by Lavender's own account, was breezy and immediate. Of course he was. For 9 years, the production had carried a secret in plain sight, a thread of unspoken family drama running quietly beneath the laughter, understood by everyone involved and stated to absolutely no one. It is a small masterclass in the kind of subtle, character-driven writing that lifted Dad's Army so far above the ordinary sitcom. Fact 8. The episodes the BBC threw away. It is one of the great scandals of British television history, and Dad's Army did not escape it. For years, the BBC kept no proper central archive. Videotape was expensive, repeats were limited by union agreements, and once a program had been broadcast, its master tapes were routinely wiped and reused to save money. Thousands of hours of classic television were quietly destroyed this way. Dad's Army lost episodes to this very practice. 3 episodes from the second series remain missing to this day, along with a couple of short sketches. No film or tape copies are known to survive anywhere. The early black and white run was hit hardest, because at the time the BBC saw little long-term commercial value in holding on to it. Some of what was feared lost has been clawed back in remarkable ways. 2 episodes once thought gone forever resurfaced, in 2001 discovered, of all places, in a garden shed where film copies had sat untouched for more than 20 years. Other soundtracks have since surfaced from private off-air recordings made by fans at the time of broadcast. The hole left by the missing material was eventually filled by sheer ingenuity. In 2019, the BBC recreated 3 of the lost installments, using the original scripts and a brand new cast, so that audiences could finally see, in some form at least, the very stories that had been so carelessly erased decades before. Fact 9. Death stalked the real platoon. The men of Walmington-on-Sea were always meant to be in the autumn of their lives, and as the years passed, the line between the gentle fiction and the harder reality grew painfully thin. The first blow came during the show's 6th series. James Beck, who played the smooth-talking spiv Private Walker, fell ill and died with shocking suddenness at just 44. He was one of the youngest of the principal cast. His character was so distinctive and so dependent on Beck's own particular charm that the writers chose not to recast him at all. Walker was, instead, quietly written out of the platoon. By the final series, the aging of the leading men was no longer a performance. Arthur Lowe was contending with narcolepsy and would sometimes drift off to sleep between takes. John Le Mesurier, the languid Sergeant Wilson, was seriously ill with cirrhosis of the liver, and John Laurie, who delivered Fraser's cries of "We're doomed" with such relish, was struggling with emphysema and a fading memory. The comedy that had always, beneath the jokes, been about old men preparing with enormous dignity and very little equipment to face the end was now being made by men who were genuinely approaching theirs. There is something quietly moving in that a warm wartime farce that, by its closing episodes, had become a portrait of real mortality, played by actors who understood precisely what they were portraying. Fact 10. A seaside town that was really in landlocked Norfolk. Walmington-on-Sea, the fictional coastal town living under perpetual threat of invasion, feels utterly real. Its anxious south coast atmosphere, that constant sense of the enemy waiting just across the water, is central to the whole identity of the show. And yet most of the platoon's outdoor adventures were filmed nowhere near the sea at all. The exterior location work was based around Thetford, in Norfolk, a town that sits comfortably inland, ringed by forest rather than by channel waves. The vast military training area nearby gave the production miles of open country across which the platoon could march, blunder and drill, while Thetford's older streets stood in for the town itself. The bond between show and town runs so deep that a bronze statue of Captain Mainwearing now sits on a bench beside the river there, a permanent tribute to the comedy the place helped to create. The series left its fingerprints on the language of British television in subtler ways too. Its closing sequence, the cast frozen in tableau beneath the words, "You have been watching," each actor then named in turn became a David Croft trademark, echoed across his later shows for years. And the end credits, with the platoon trudging across a smoke-filled field, were a deliberate homage to the 1944 wartime film The Way Ahead, in which, as it happens, John Laurie himself had once appeared. More than half a century on, Dad's Army endures the template for the ensemble sitcom, repeated almost without pause, and still, for millions of people, the warmest portrait of a country at war that television has ever produced.